This is just a short video looking at the implementation of biochar in an orchard using a technique that I believe is called vertical mulching. If that's not the correct term, I hereby name it vertical mulching. This was recorded in August 2014. Our orchard is in the Adelaide Hills, where we grow predominantly chestnuts. But unlike normal conventional orchards, our trees are interspersed with cherries, apples, nectarines, ashes, plums, etc. The pH of this particular orchard is incredibly acidic with 4.5. We've worked in the past to try and improve the pH by using dolomite and lime. This year, however, I'm using biochar, which is a charcoal and has a pH of about 11, so I'm hoping that this will change the overall pH. The biochar comes from a local company called SA Biochar Works in Macclesfield in South Australia, and Greg sources this from just local waste wood. One of the problems with a conventional orchard is that the roots are surface feeding. So if you were to disturb the actual surface itself, you can actually set back the trees considerably. So the Japanese came up with a theory of digging a series of holes around the drip line of the tree. So for each of our large chestnut trees, I've basically drilled 8 holes in a circle around them, and these have been filled with biochar. When I started this process, I used a Hamilton tree planter, which is a handheld foot-propelled mechanism. And I realised that I'd need to dig 80 holes for every tree, so I purchased a post hole digger. This is a cherry tree, which has produced about 4 cherries in its entire life. And so we're just digging 3 holes around the circumference of the drip line. Each of the holes is about 300 mils deep, and I'm using a 6-inch auger, that's 150 mil. This is some gypsum that we're just throwing into the bottom of the hole. Our soil here is fairly heavily clay, and it's just a handful of a mineral mix which we had formulated for us. So I just put a cupful of that into each of the holes. Now, I'd been told that it was a good idea to pre-charge the biochar, and that is to add some nutrients to it before you placed it in the hole. I tried this and I found it very difficult to put the wet, soggy biochar into a hole. So what I did in the end was I just used the dry biochar, just had it in a drum, and then basically it was a simple matter then really of just tipping it from the drum straight into the hole. I found that it was easier to actually make up a liquid solution. In this case, I just used an NPK soluble fertilizer, mixed it up into a watering can, and then once the biochar was in the hole, just gave a bit of a drink to it, and then just with the boot, it just literally put the soil back onto the top. A small tree like this took me about 5 minutes for the entire process. Some of the larger chestnut trees were about 10 to 12 minutes. It's now 4 months later, December 2014. It's probably a coincidence, but we've had some amazing transformation to the non-chestnut trees. We've got a small quince that has produced fruit for the first time this year. We've got 4 apricot trees that in the past produced a total of about 20 apricots, and I think this year we're looking at something like 200 between them, despite the bottom 3 foot being eaten by the neighbour's sheep. About 10 years ago we bought a feijoa tree and planted it, and it basically has sulked for 10 years, hasn't flowered, hasn't grown. This year there's about a dozen flowers on it, so we'll see whether anything eventuates from this. About 6 years ago we purchased a number of apple trees of different varieties and put them in. They've all fruited, except for one Fuji, which has never had any flowers, it's never had any fruit. Except for this year, which as you can see here seems to be absolutely loaded. So not only did it flower for the first time, but those flowers seem to set. Whether this will eventuate into any fruit, we'll have to find out. These are the cherry trees that I've actually dug the holes around in the video. We've had about 4 cherries in the past from these, and yet this year there's just vast clumps of cherries on all of the trees. The cherries themselves are not quite the size of golf balls, but they're well on their way towards it. We had another couple of trees which had never ever produced cherries before and had them on this year, but unfortunately the neighbours' sheep have scoffed a lot. About 10 years ago we bought 2 olive trees which have never ever flowered or fruited. It's a bit difficult to see, but there are literally thousands of flowers on this olive tree and potentially hundreds of olives. Again, first time. About 12 years ago we put in a number of hazelnut trees that produced absolutely nothing, except this year there's a series of hazelnuts. Not vast numbers of them, but at least they're there. So all of this is probably a coincidence, but it's food for thought.